Now, this question is under word classes, and JAMB frequently tests relative pronouns. What are the relative pronouns? We have which, that, who, and whom. Okay, and I know that the challenge is usually between who and whom. Okay, now the ultimate trick or hack is that when you can use he, she, and they, then it is who. When you can use him, her, and them, then it is whom. Okay, now let's take a look at the sentence. Now, in this sentence, there are distractions, okay? There are clauses that are just extra information. They are not important. They are not needed, okay? They are not necessary, okay? So we need to focus on the important words, okay? So let's remove the distractions. We have with two of is aids. This is number one distraction. The committee members say is another distraction. So let's remove them. We'll be left with the chairman is the only dash understands the issue. Okay, this is a simple sentence and we understand what is going on here. Okay, we just need to complete it with the relative pronoun. Now, the noun before the relative pronoun, the noun before the dash, usually refers to the relative pronoun, whether who or whom. The noun usually refers to the relative pronoun. So, what is the noun before the dash? The chairman. Now, the second question you ask yourself is the chairman performing the action or is he receiving the action? What is the action here? Understands. Understands is the main verb. So the chairman is performing the action of understanding the issue, right? So that makes the answer who. Because when the relative pronoun performs the action, then it is who. When the relative pronoun receives the action, then it is whom. The chairman is performing the action, then it is what? Who. Okay, so option B is the answer to this question. Now, many people will wrongly pick option A, whom, as the answer to this question because of the clause the committee members say. But the main verb that determines the relative pronoun is understand, not say. Okay, so the committee members say is just an extra information, an added clause, more like a reporting clause. Think of it this way: the committee members said that, right? The chairman understands the issue. So let's test it using the pronoun he or him. So do you say he understands the issue or him understands the issue? You definitely say he understands the issue. That makes option B, who, the answer to this question. Here is another question that will test your knowledge on relative pronoun. Okay, so we can see that in this question we can't use whose, right? Because whose shows possession. For example, the man whose car was stolen. This will work, but not here. Option D, we can't say which because which is used for things. Okay, we can't use which here. So we have to choose between option A and B because who and whom are used for people. Now take a look at the sentence. You can see the gap, the part we need to fill. Now before the gap, you see the man, right? So the relative pronoun that will fill in this gap has to refer to the man. Now the second question you're going to ask yourself is, where is the action? What is the action? The action is insulted. Now, who is performing the action? Is the man performing the action or is he receiving the action? You can see that the man is receiving the action from who? The driver. And because the man is receiving the action, it is what? Whom. If the man were to be performing the action, then it would be who. For example, in this sentence, the man dash insulted the driver was arrested. So in this sentence, it will be who. The man who insulted the driver was arrested. But here, it is whom. The man whom the driver insulted was arrested. So final answer is what? B. Now here is another question that will test your knowledge on relative pronoun. Now without the relative pronoun who or whom, you should be able to interpret the sentence. And to do this successfully or accurately, you need to be able to determine who is performing the action and who is receiving the action. Once you miss this, you will struggle between who and whom. So let's first interpret the sentence, right? The candidate was the only one of the contestants to dash the judges had given the highest score. What does this mean? The candidate is one of the contestants and the judges had given the highest score to this candidate. So we know who is performing the action and we know who is receiving the action and we know what the action is at giving. Okay. Now the candidate is receiving the action, is receiving the highest score from who? The judges. So because the candidate is receiving the action, the answer is whom. Because this part we need to fill has to refer to the antecedent, and the antecedent is what? The candidate. So whatever the candidate is doing in this sentence determines the relative pronoun. So since the candidate is receiving the action, it has to be whom. That makes option B the answer to this question. Now let me give you a trick, a tip. Okay, don't tell anyone. Now, whenever a preposition is used before or after, as you can see, a preposition is used before to, please just go for whom. Okay, the answer is often whom. So, a few examples, yeah. To whom are you speaking? Whom are you speaking to? So, you can see before and after. With whom did you come? Whom did you come with? From whom did you receive the message? Whom did you receive the message from? Okay, so whenever you see a preposition before and after, just go for whom. Okay, final answer to this question is option B. Under what classes, JAMB also loves to test order of adjectives. So adjectives are arranged in a particular order. All you need to do is memorize the order. Okay, we have number 1, opinion; 2, size; 3rd is age; 4th is shape; next is color; and then we have origin, material, purpose, and finally we have the noun. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is classify individual words under each of the category. So let's take option A for example. We have young. Young is age. Young, old, they are under age. Nigerian is under origin. Tall is under size. Tall, short is under size. So we should have size first, and then next will be young, which is the age, and finally origin. So we met a tall young Nigerian woman at the event. So option B is the final answer to this question. Easy peasy. Now we know the order of adjectives. Okay, let's repeat it one last time. The first is opinion, second is size, third is age, fourth is shape, next is color, origin, material, purpose, and finally noun. So next is we want to classify the individual words under each category. Okay, so let's take option A for example, right? Beautiful is what? Opinion. Large is what? Size. New is what? Age. Leather is material. Italian is origin. Okay. So option C is the answer to this question. Okay. Beautiful, large, new, Italian, leather, handbag. Okay, so in your exam, if pencils are allowed, I would advise you write down the order of adjectives so that you don't get confused. Okay. So final answer to this question is what? Option C. In English grammar, there is what we call collocation, and JAMB loves to set questions on that collocation. Now, what is collocation? Collocation is the natural way that words go together. They are commonly used together, they are paired together. Okay, now JAMB wants to know if you know the natural expression, and there are different categories. We can have a verb and a noun, we can have adjective and noun. For example, catch a cold. Now, if someone says to you, you would develop a code if you stay in this room, you understand what the person is saying, but that's not the natural expression. The natural expression is catch a code, make payments, pay attention, heavy traffic, heavy rain. So this is the natural way we express ourselves, okay? The natural way we see these things, right? So this question is under collocation. The company is facing dash pressure to reduce cost. The answer to this question is heavy pressure. Okay, so option C is the final answer to this question. So we are still under word classes, and JAMB loves to test comparative and superlative structures. And do not forget that comparative and superlative structures belong to adverbs and adjective depending on what the word modifies. If it modifies a noun, then it is adjective. If it modifies a verb, then it is an adverb. Okay, please note that. Now, this question is under the comparative and superlative, structures, specifically comparative. Now, in this sentence, you can see that it is comparing two things: this year's examination and last year's examination. Okay, and you can see Dan. Dan requires a comparative form. Okay, so the answer to this question is more difficult. Okay, we can't say most difficult because it is superlative. Okay, we can say this exam is the most difficult exam I have ever written. It works that way. We can't say very difficult because very does not compare to things. Okay, it doesn't, right? We can't say too difficult because too shows excess, not comparison, right? So final answer to this question is what? Option A. So this question is under comparative structures, and we can see that this sentence is comparing two things. We see better than, okay? So it's comparing two things. Now the gap needs to be filled with an adverb. Okay, certain adverbs are used to intensify comparatives, like better. Okay, they are called stronger intensifiers or weaker intensifiers. Okay, so for the stronger intensifiers, we have far, way, a lot, much. For the weaker intensifiers, we have slightly, a bit, a little. Okay, so in the options, you can see option B, much. Okay, so this is a strong intensifier. Okay, so it can be used to intensify the adjective better. Okay, the new policy is much better than the previous one. Now, I have a video lesson on comparative and superlative structures, explaining how it is formed, the tricks and the hacks that you need to observe. There's also a document for it, and students who are in my learning group or candidates who are in my learning group have access to this. So if you want to be a part of it, send me a DM. So the answer to this question is what? Option B. And finally, under word classes, JAMB frequently tests conjunctions, conjunctions that show contrast, that show concession, reason, condition. You need to know the difference. Okay, now take a look at this question. Dash is very intelligent, he sometimes makes careless mistakes. You need to understand the sentence first. You see that there's a difference, there's a contrast. He is very intelligent, sometimes he makes mistakes. So what conjunction would show that contrast, would express that contrast? Although, okay? Although is a conjunction that expresses contrast. When we say because expresses or shows reason, okay? Since shows reason or time. Unless shows condition. So final answer to this question is although. Option B is your final answer. We examined all the topics under word classes. Now we want to talk about clauses and sentence patterns, which is also in the JAM English syllabus. Okay, so under this, JAM loves to set questions like question tag and reported speech. Okay, so let's start with question tag. Now there are some things you need to know about question tag, not just a positive statement attracts a negative tag, a negative statement attracts a positive tag. What really makes a positive statement or negative statement? Do you know that not is not the only thing that suggests that a statement is negative? Words like nobody, hardly, barely, scarcely are negative words, and when you see them in a statement, you must use a positive word tag. Now take a look at this question. Nobody understood the instructions clearly. This is a negative statement because of nobody. Okay, so we need to use words a positive tag. Now, nobody takes day. When you see nobody, somebody, okay, everybody, it takes day. So you make sure you use day. Okay. So the answer to this question is what? Option A. Did they? Okay. Not didn't they. Okay. Didn't they is, negative. We need a positive tag. We can't say did he because nobody is they. Okay. Didn't he? We can't use didn't because we need a positive tag. So final answer to this question is what? Option A. So this question is under reported speech. Okay, so most times you'll be given a direct speech and you'll be expected to change it to an indirect speech. Now, while changing it to an indirect speech, do you know that there are about 3 to 4 changes that occur? Let's use this question as an example. Okay, Bola said to me, "Why are you coming late?" This is a direct speech. So while changing it to an indirect speech, first we need to change are, the tense are. It's a simple present tense. We need to backshift. It is called backshifting. Okay, so you backshift the tense and it becomes was. Okay, next is you. You change you to I. The next is you change tomorrow to the next day. Okay, now finally, you've changed are to was and you've changed you to I. Okay, so it should be why was I. Now you're going to remove the question inversion and then it becomes why I was. Okay, so option A is your answer. Why I was coming late the next day. Bola asked me why I was coming late the next day. So option A is the final answer to this question. Now there's a detailed video explanation for these. There's a document that gives you lots of examples. You see the way time expression changes, you see the way pronouns can change and tense. Okay, see lots of examples. So if you want to be a part of my learning group, please send me a DM. Okay, final answer to this question is what? Option A. JAMB also sets questions under tense and aspects, so they really want to know if you know the 12 English tenses that we have. Now, this question is under the future perfect tense. How do we know this? By this time next year. This phrase tells us that it is a completed action before the future time. So it requires a future perfect tense. And how do we compose this? Will plus have plus past participle. And that makes option C the final answer to this question. We can't say will complete because will complete is what? Future tense. Okay? We can't use complete because complete is present tense. We can't use as completed because this is present perfect. We need a future perfect tense. Okay? So option C is the final answer to this question. This question is also under tense and aspect, and looking at this sentence, I can tell that it is under the present perfect tense. Okay, how do I know this? Since. Whenever you see since, think of what? Present perfect tense. And how do we compose this? How do we form the present perfect tense? Have or has, depending on the subject and the past participle. Okay, you can see that the verb here is see. So the past participle will be what? Seen. See, saw, seen. Okay, now the subject here is I. Okay, so I have. Okay, not I as. Okay, I have. So I have not seen. Okay, so final answer to this question is option B. We can't say did not see because this is past tense. It does not fit this structure. We can't say had not seen because this is past perfect. Does not fit the structure. We can't say I'm not seen because this is present continuous. It doesn't fit this structure also. So, final answer to this question is option B. Now, this question is under concord, the subject verb agreement, and JAMB loves to set questions under concord. So, you need to know the rules. Okay, so take a look at this question. The rule of concord that will help you solve this question is the proximity rule. When two or more subjects are joined by either or, neither, nor, the verb must agree with the nearest subject. So the nearest subject here is the secretary. You see, the governor, his commissioners, his advisors, or the secretary, right? Dash to address the press. So the secretary is singular. Therefore, the verb must be singular. So you can see that option B is the only singular verb that we have. So option B is the final answer to this question. So this is another question under concord, and you need to know the rule. Okay, the rule states that if a word like with, together with, as well as is used to join two subjects, the verb must agree with the first subject. Okay, so take a look at the sentence. The director together with his assistants dash attending the conference. So the first subject or the first noun is the director, okay, which is singular. So this determines the verb. You can see that the second subject is what? Is assistants, which is plural, right? So the director determines the verb, and so it will be a singular verb. That makes option C the final answer to this question. All other options are what? Plural. So option C is the final answer to this question. Now there's a video explanation on concord. Okay, this video outlines 9 rules of concord, and you need to know them because JAMB often sets questions from these rules. Okay, so if you want to be a part of my learning group, please send me a DM. Okay, final answer to this question is option C. And finally, in grammar, you get questions that test your spelling. Okay, so JAMB wants to know if you can spell accurately. Okay, now there are different spelling rules. Now for this question, it is under the British versus American spelling. Okay, so you need to know the difference, and you need to know that as Nigerians we speak the British English. Okay, so you need to follow the British rule. Okay, now we are looking for caliber. CALIBER is the American spelling. CALIBRE is the British spelling. So final answer is option B. Okay, there are other examples: liter, center, ER American, RE British. Okay, so final answer is option B. Now if you want to have access to the other spelling rules, you have to be a part of my learning group. Okay, so if you want to be a part of this, send me a DM. Okay, so final answer is option B.